It's definitely on. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I'm so happy to see you here. My name is Dr. Jill Dupy. For those of you whom I haven't met before, I hope I will have the chance to meet you afterwards. I have the pleasure and privilege of serving as the Beaux-Arts Director and Chief Curator here at the Low Art Museum, part of our beloved University of Miami. Tonight is a really special night because we are celebrating the inauguration of our 2024 ArtLab. I know that I should keep my remarks short. I'm going to try to do so, but please indulge me because I want to share a little bit with you about ArtLab, and I also have a whole bunch of really, really wonderful people to thank, many of whom are in this very room. So, in 2009, May 8th to be precise, before I joined the Low Art Museum, we hosted the Low, that is, their very first ArtLab, thanks to Stella Holmes, who is here with us this evening. It was really her brainchild, and she has been very supportive of the program from the start. The premise of the ArtLab is still the same. It's an upper-level seminar co-led by faculty from across disciplines at the University of Miami, often art historians, including for the past 2 years, and even once more before that, or maybe twice more before that, Dr. Nathan Timpano, who is a repeat offender, and we're very pleased that he is with us this evening. Nathan is also an associate professor in art history and the chair of the art and art history program here at the University of Miami. So every spring semester, as I was saying, ArtLab hosts, the Low is hosted by the ArtLab, which is led by a faculty member from across disciplines, and it really is designed to be a hands-on curatorial learning practicum. What does that mean? That means that we work with a group of students ranging between 7 and 12 generally, sometimes just undergrads, sometimes a blend of graduates and undergrads, and they mine our permanent collection. And they also more recently have been working with estates of collectors and living artists so that they can learn really what it means to be a curator. What is the day in a life? And in breakneck record speed, 15 weeks, they put together a full show, and they also create a catalog. I can tell you that this really is astonishing because a typical exhibition takes approximately 3 to 5 years to put together. So they really go guns a-blazing and do wonderful work. The program has continued to evolve, mature, and really become something even, I think, more ambitious and wonderful with each passing year. Because one of the things that I think is so special about ArtLab, beyond the fact that it's a blend of practice and theory, is that we take the students, all of them, on their spring break on an immersive learning field trip. And we pay for it, thanks to the generosity of our supporters, many of whom are in this room, so that we're sure that everyone can go. So typically we have gone to New York, to LA. We went before my time to Panama, and I will confess, coming out of COVID, because the day before we were to leave for Havana, Cuba with our ArtLab cohort in 2020, we went into lockdown. So when all of that was in the rearview mirror, I, like many others, I think had the revenge travel bug. And I said to Dr. Timpano, we're going to go to Kyoto. And he said, that's great. You know, it's also Asia Art Week in New York at the same time. And so I like a big challenge, and we were able to actually raise $65,000 last year to be able to take all of our students to Kyoto for a full week, which was amazing. Yes. Through all of this, we have not only built but enriched our relationship with the Consulate General of Japan, and I would like to acknowledge their cultural attaché, Kenichiro Irisawa, who is in the room with us this evening. Thank you very much, and your team as well for being with us. Through their office and the Consul General himself, we have received tremendous support, and it was actually the Consul General who said, you know, what you did with the students last year in Kyoto is fabulous. There is this wonderful program that is funded by the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs called Kakahashi, which does exactly what you're trying to do. It's an exchange program where U.S. students are sent to Japan for an immersive experience. I'm delighted to report that we were amongst the competitive Kakahashi participants this last round. So the students who are in the room with us this evening, 7 of them that you'll meet very, very soon, were able to go to not just Kyoto, but to, Tokyo and a little beautiful town outside of Kyoto called Hinocho, where they had homestay experiences with families, which was really quite special. So I encourage you to seek the students out at the reception that follows. And now, students, I'm going to have you stand up so that they know who to look for when we're at the reception. So I have, of course, many words of thanks to share with people both in the room and not this evening. But first and foremost, I would again like to thank Dr. Timpano, who has been really a joy to work with, but also I think just has held such a high standard in terms of the learning and even the catalog, in which he played a critical role, including the design. And we will have catalogs for you. By the way, these are the beautiful ArtLab catalogs that were just produced, printed, and in our hands yesterday. So I encourage you to make sure you get one of these also when you are at the Low. But I would also like to thank the students because they really are the engine. So Isabel Gomez, Jackson Harris, Xavier Lane, Mila Nicolas Nader, Benjamin Rosen Capolazzo, Jimena Salazar, and Divya Srinivasan. And I know I did that wrong, I'm sorry. But thank you all very, very much. Because our guest speaker's work is so beautiful and literally poetic, as you'll find out very soon, very much invested in words, we wanted to do something a little bit different this year and work with MFAs in creative writing as well. Another first for ArtLab. So thanks to, again, Nathan and our colleagues in the creative writing program, we have four graduate students who contributed beautiful works to this catalog as well. And I'm seeing, I was going to say, I didn't print the second page. Yes, I did. And so please, students, would you also stand up? Rose Jenny, Alan Means, Sankara Olamayai, and Evan Wambeki, all MFA candidates in UM's creative writing program. And really, your work is stunning. Thank you very much for being a part of ArtLab this year. So, a few words of thanks, and then on to the main event. We at the Low rely on our supporters to make all of our exhibitions and our engagement programs possible. ArtLab is, of course, no exception. I therefore wish to recognize the Berkowitz Contemporary Foundation, the Frank Family Charitable Foundation, Jane Hurt, Dr. Perry Lee Roberts, the Cardinal Four Foundation, Marie and Harley Lipman, Tracy Berkowitz, Gustavo and Lori Calleja, Lori Stassen and Michael Troner for their invaluable support. Without you, ArtLab at the Low 2024 truly would not have been possible. Additional support was provided by the State of Florida Department of State, Division of Arts and Culture, the Florida Council on Arts and Culture, and the National Endowment for the Arts, the Miami-Dade County Department of Cultural Affairs and the Cultural Affairs Council, the Miami-Dade Mayor and Board of County Commissioners, the City of Beaux-Arts, City of Coral Gables, Beaux-Arts Miami, and our members at the Low, all of whom I also thank most sincerely. Now, on to our guest speaker, the wonderful Miya Ando. Miya Ando's paintings, sculptures, and installation artworks have been the subject of solo exhibitions at Asia Society Texas, Houston, the Noguchi Museum, New York, SCAD Museum of Art, Savannah, Georgia, the Nassau County Museum of Art, Roslyn Harbor, New York, and the American University in Washington, D.C. She also has a large public installation entitled Flower Atlas that was recently on display in the Winter Garden in New York's Brookfield Place, which some of you may have seen. Work by Ando has also been included in group exhibitions at Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art in Bentonville, Arkansas, LACMA, the Haus der Kunst in Munich, and the Brooklyn Museum, as well as the Queen Museums, both in New York. Her work is included in prestigious collections across the country and further afield, including some of the museums that I just mentioned, as well as the Detroit Institute of Arts, Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art, the Santa Barbara Museum of Art, which is where I saw her work for the first time in real life, and I was gobsmacked, and I knew that we had to work with her, among other public institutions and, of course, private collections as well. She has been the recipient of several grants and awards, including the Pollock-Krasner Foundation grant, and has produced numerous public commissions, most notably a 30-foot tall sculpture built from World Trade Center steel installed in in Olympic Park, London, to mark the 10-year anniversary of 9/11, for which she was nominated for a DARC award in Best Light Art Installation. Ando was also commissioned to create artwork for the historic Philip Johnson Glass House in New Canaan, Connecticut. She holds a bachelor's degree in East Asian Studies from UC Berkeley, perused Eastern Art Studies at Yale University and Stanford, and apprenticed with a master metalsmith in Japan. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming warmly our dear friend, Miya Ando.
Hello. I think this mic is can you hear me? I don't know if I'm speaking here or speaking here. Good? Okay. Thank you so much for having me this evening. I'm Miya Ando, and it really is a privilege. It's an honor to be participant in the ArtLab, and it's been really fun. It's been a very interesting experience to work with the students of ArtLab, and I want to thank very much Dr. Jill, Dr. Nathan, Dr. Tola, and the Little Museum of Art for having me. I would like to start this evening's conversation with a Zen go. A Zen go is a Zen idiom or Zen phrase. Seizan moto fudo, hakuun, onozukara koraisu. Seizan moto fudo, the blue mountain is immovable. Hakuun onozukara koraisu, the white cloud drifts by. The blue mountain, blue and green, were formerly the same color in Japan. The blue mountain, fudo, does not move, and the white clouds drift by. This is in a lineage of Zen thought depicting nature as a mirror for the human condition, nature as a mirror for the self. I'm very fond of, in Zen, this seemingly, it's deceptively simple. It is a mountain and a cloud juxtaposed. They appear to be, in fact, diametrically opposed, I would say. The mountain is enduring forever. It doesn't change. And there is a cloud, which really is very transitory and fleeting, changing moment by moment. This dialectic, this juxtaposition, in fact, arises from the idea in Buddhism that the fundamental nature of reality is that all constituent forms that create the universe are temporary. All things are temporary. I am temporary, you are temporary, this lectern is temporary. And this idea is called mujo. Mujo in Buddhism means impermanence, and it is a foundation concept for the philosophy, not just Zen. Zen is one sect of Buddhism, but this idea that is a bridge between all things, all objects, all people, is something that has informed my art practice. Clouds are a very, in Zen they say, why natural vernacular, vernacular of the natural world? Because it's ordinary, it's accessible. Everyone sees a cloud and knows, even children, they change by moment to moment. In fact, clouds are a clock of milliseconds in nature. And so I've been quite attracted to this vernacular to discuss time and temporality and this notion of mujo, impermanence. Mujo and non-duality. The non-duality between a cloud and a mountain. They are seemingly quite different, but in fact they share something. They're both impermanent. There is a sutra, very famous and concise sutra, that I would encourage anyone who's interested in this notion of mujo to look at. It's very short. In fact, it's one of the shortest sutras. It's called the Heart Sutra. And in the Heart Sutra, among other things, there's a passage and it says, form is emptiness and emptiness is form. This goes into this discussion of mujo and impermanence. In fact, that if all things are in a constant state of change, they do not have a distinct, independent reality unto themselves. They are, I would encourage, I won't go into a full discussion of mujo because it can go, it says on my notes, don't go down a rabbit hole. So that's a rabbit hole that I won't go down. Getting back to the idea of clouds and the cloud paintings, this discussion, the title of this discussion is Clouds and Mono no Aware. Mono no Aware is an idea that arises from impermanence. It is a word that lacks a direct translation. Many people say mono no aware is the pathos of things. My personal interpretation is an appreciation and sensitivity for the transience of things. Mono no aware is a notice of particularly fleeting things. Mostly in nature is a very good way to depict fleetingness. It can be things of the heart as well. Mono no aware is something that is imbued with empathy. You have empathy for particularly fleeting things. And when I say fleeting things, I'm talking about things that have the nature of hakanai. Hakanai is a Japanese word that means fleeting. And it is written, person standing next to a dream. So things of hakanai nature I've been focused on since graduate school. That would be things like clouds, rain, a shooting star, for example, the waxing and waning of the moon. Now, mono no aware contains within it not only an awareness and appreciation of fleeting things in nature, but this empathy, which is key to the concept. It is a gentle wistfulness. It's a slight sorrow in the recognition of something that was there and gone. And the more fleeting it is, the more sublime and the more beautiful it is. Oftentimes, ohanami, the watching of sakura, cherry blossoms, is given as an illustrator to this concept of mono no aware. Now, we just passed the flower viewing season in Japan in the spring, and it feels like everyone talks about it and goes to see it, and it is celebrated. Why is it celebrated? Yes, the flowers are beautiful and they bloom, they're very short-lived and they fall really beautifully. Why is this cherry blossom so lauded? Because it is a metaphor. It's a metaphor for our lives. You're the flower. It is a metaphor for the fleetingness of all things, which is in fact a bridge between all of us, all of the things. Subeta no mono, everything is impermanent. Going back to this idea of mujo, from which this idea of the appreciation of cherry blossoms arises. So there is a differentiation. in the recognition of beauty in impermanence. In fact, in the West, it could be deemed as nihilistic. It's like a little bit of a bummer to think about impermanence and, oh, your impermanent life. Well, in Japanese thought, in Japanese philosophy, there is a psychological shift that occurs where there's an appreciation and an awareness to fleetingness. And one feels lucky. You feel lucky you saw that falling maple leaf. It fell so beautifully. And in this, nature is a mirror. Nature depicts ourself. Nature depicts our existence. And so there is an affinity, there is a closeness to nature. Another example of mono no aware, which I look at in my work, is the 72 seasons calendar, Shichiju Nikko. Ancient Japan had not 4 seasons, 72 seasons, 365 days in 72 seasons. That is about 5 to 6 days each season. It's very minute observation of nature and phenological shifts that occur. This particular season, today, we're in a season called Frost Ends and Rice Seedlings Begin. Next season, which actually is next week, peony flowers bloom. The following is frogs start singing. There are very poetic names. They are poetic in and of themselves. They're poetic in the attunement and to these minute chronicling and observations of our environment and our surroundings. So the 72 seasons, they have names such as thunder raises its voice, rainbows disappear. That's a season. The wild geese return, the wild geese depart. And so there is this closeness and, again, an affinity to nature, as nature can be a mirror of our own selves. Mujo imbues this calendar. Impermanence, as nature is constantly shifting. Another example, you will find, if you become attuned to mono no aware, you'll see it everywhere. It's sort of ubiquitous in Japanese literature and culture. The classic example, the illustrator of mono no aware, is the world's first novel. And the world's first novel was written in the 11th century. It also happens to be written by a lady, not a woman. Yes, a woman and a lady. Lady Murasaki Shikibu. Her name, Murasaki, means purple. And Murasaki Shikibu wrote the world's first novel, and it is called The Tale of Genji. And often, Tale of Genji is described as 54 chapters of mono no aware. And so if you are fond of this notion and this ethos, I encourage the Tale of Genji, Genji Monogatari. Don't be scared, because it is robust, but it's also a page turner. It's got everything in it. It has love, and it's kind of tragic. Well, I think it's a page turner. I don't know. Anyway, so this idea of mono no aware is something that clouds really are an illustrator of. Clouds are constantly changing. They are really, it's vocabulary that says transience. And so I have been working on this series for about 10 years, and I'd like to discuss a little bit about the genesis of this series. I am of mixed race. I'm half Japanese and half Russian American. my maternal grandfather, my family lives in a place called Okayama. Some of you may know Okayama because you have to go through Okayama to get to Naoshima, the island of art. That might be the only reason why you would know Okayama. I grew up between Okayama and the Santa Cruz Mountains. I lived in a small Nichiren Buddhist temple surrounded by rice fields, and was exposed to traditional Japanese thought, such as this 72 seasons. The lineage of my family, I'm going to go into because it informs the works on a material level, I would say. I'm the 15th generation of two families, my grandparents, and on my grandfather's side, Ando, we have an ancestor who was a swordsmith and made a sword that has been identified by Japan as an important cultural object. And this has been the source of the identity of the Ando family or clan, if you will. As a young woman, I returned to Japan to become an apprentice for a master metalsmith. There I learned that Nihonto, Japanese swords, have something very particular, and it is called a hamon, a cloud-like pattern on the edge of a sword. Japanese swords, in my opinion, are the apex weapon. They have one purpose only. And within Japanese Nihonto construction and the creation, there is, poetically and paradoxically, a cloud pattern that appears on the very sharp edge. And it is quite a juxtaposition. I will say one thing about Japanese swordsmithing and Okayama, which was formerly called the country of Bizen. And you may know, those who are fans of ceramics may have seen and heard Bizen yaki. Bizen yaki is Bizen pottery that is always unglazed and very unusual because it is sepia-hued. It is unglazed and sepia-hued because there is iron in the earth in Okayama. The iron in the earth oxidizes when it's put into the kiln. The iron in the earth in Bizen, in Okayama, also makes for incredible swords. The soil contains iron in that region of Japan and is smelted and made into something called tamahagane, which is a steel that is created by the iron in the sand, in the earth. And so in the world of Japanese Nihonto sword smithing, those erudite in the world of swords in Japan know Bizen swords because of this condition of the earth. So I am from a legacy. 15 generations is a long legacy. And so I was the first person of mixed race in my hometown of Okayama. And there is, because Japan is a homogeneous, racially homogeneous nation, there was some marginalization, being of a different race. And so part of my own personal searching and trying to comprehend my identity, where I fit in, I returned to Japan to study this metallurgy that was so part of the Ando identity. I will say a story that my great uncles, they don't speak English, so I think maybe I'm okay. But when Japan lost the war. When the war was finished, Japan had a full surrender of all armaments. And this was house to house in some cases. And so all armaments of any kind, of course guns, including swords, were surrendered to the United States military. And in my family, this is where it gets very edgy, this story. My family, because they were swordsmiths of renown, kept the swords. In fact, they brought them back to our country estate, which is called Tsuyama, further into the country, and they buried them. And so I have seen them. And what do swords represent? Your entire, the spine of your family and your identity. And so this notion, it was a little shocking to me. If you had seen, there's a gorgeous exhibition at the Met Museum. It was called Japanese Arms and Armaments, maybe now about 8 years or so ago. 90% of that weaponry came from within the United States. So as a young woman, I went back to Japan to look and to study this very particular type of Japanese metallurgy. The hamon, the edge pattern, it is created, a Japanese sword has a very sharp edge, and it is also quite rigid. That's what makes it this apex weapon. To have two rigidities in one object requires a varying degree of tempering steel. How does one vary the degree? The edge is covered with sort of a clay to protect the edge. The edge, if it were as hard as the spine, you could never sharpen it. On the edge, this tempering technique creates a cloud pattern. And so now you have an object which has the one function. You don't take out a sword to like scratch a person just like a little bit. If it's out, there's death involved, very near and certain. And you've got a cloud, which suggests this idea of mujo, impermanence, and transience. And so this impacted me greatly as a young woman, and it still impacts me. In fact, you are looking at them now. Every painting I made since my apprenticeship was a study of hamon. Now, the Ando hamon looks a little bit like cumulus clouds. And those in the swordsmithing world can identify the families based just on the hamon. There's another family hamon. It looks also like cumulus clouds, but it has little spots, tiny little dots. Those dots, they're leaves. They're leaves floating in the wind with clouds. And I have to say that I'm a little jealous of that family. A little bit. Just a little bit, though. Now, that hamon and the poetry, the inherent poetry in that object, as I said, these works arise from this concept. I'd like to discuss just a little bit about the technical and material components of the works. You will see that the works are on metal. I went into the study of metal due to from my family in the beginning, and I've remained utilizing the substrate, the metal substrate, for its ability, its inherent ability. It redirects light. It has the ability to create an experience of showing viscerally transitoriness in light. So my way of thinking, my approach to art making is that art is thinking. You are just seeing residue of thought. There is a material that is always most articulate. There is the most appropriate medium for each concept, for each idea. And for the clouds, a mercurial surface, a mutable surface, that would be metal. Metal for its unique qualities, its inherent qualities. It's the nature of metal. So as you view the works, there is a shifting of light, and there is a transitory quality. The metal and this visceral experiential quality I find to be very important for the dialogue of art. So art is not a soliloquy. It's a dialogue. In fact, I find it a distinct privilege to be participant in what I consider the most elegant form of communication, because it's silent. An artist makes something, and a viewer brings their entire background and their history and the knowledge contained within their experience thus far, and encounters a painting, and it says, the painting or the sculpture says, oh, I remind you of something, or I appear this way. And each person has their own dialogue with this object. And I find that to be a privilege to be participant in this form of communication. The metal serves as the substrate can articulate something. Sometimes we understand things with our bodies. Sometimes we understand things viscerally, not simply in our intellect or conceptually. And so I try to think about what these materials that can suggest or reiterate the concept via their materiality themselves. And so this is some of the reasons, these are some of the reasons why metal has been selected as the substrate for these paintings. These paintings, you may notice, have a place and a time. And it is because they are like a vector for me. They are a point, a pinpoint in space and time. They are actually fleeting moments. It's a moment it passed. They begin as photographs. And it is a way of capturing, it is a way of encapsulating this idea of mono no aware. It's a way to capture and make static mujo, something impermanent and quite transitory. As you can take 60 photographs in one 60-second period. That means one, I won't do the math, obviously it's a photograph per second is what I'm trying to say. They all look a little bit different. They really do, because they shift so ever so, it's nuanced. You have to look very carefully, but it is almost a chronicle. It is my observation. It is my moment in mono no aware. Something occurred, and it's past. And I saw it, and it was beautiful. And it is a recording of that. It is an observation and a chronicling. It might be a life in clouds, I don't know. And it is something that I try to communicate. As I said, these are the next iteration. You will see some very, very quiet paintings that are first of the Hamon paintings, and they have evolved. Each painting comes from the last painting, because why? Art is thinking. Art is just someone's thoughts that you are seeing manifest physically. A thought begets another thought. You step back, see, and then the next thought. It is just a recording of thoughts. I would like to close with a small discussion of my titles. You may have noticed, if you have seen the works, the titles are bilingual. Why are the titles bilingual? It is for one reason, and that is lacuna. Lacuna are lexical gaps. They are words that appear in one language and not in another language. They can be called untranslatable things. They are words that suggest the very soul of a society. When something is valued, it is given a name. Unkai. These paintings, unkai means a sea of clouds. I have another within the series of clouds, kumo tasogare. Tasogare means dusk or twilight. But it actually derives from an ancient Japanese word, which tasogare means who goes there? Who goes there? And it is because it's just for a very particular time of evening, a time in twilight where the sun has gone down and you cannot discern friend or foe. It's just dark enough that you say, who goes there? Who is that? And that is the word. It's in a modern Japanese, you say, あなたは誰ですか? 誰ですか? But in ancient Japan, it was tare, tasogare. So these words have no direct translation. I mean, look how in earnest I'm trying to describe a simple word like tasogare. It is of interest, it has been of interest since graduate school to examine and look at words that do not exist in the English language of hakanai things, fleeting things, rain, snow, shooting stars, clouds. And so in the titles of the works, you will see a Japanese word translated into an English word. This sort of apex, the kind of, over COVID, pardon me, I wrote 2 dictionaries. One dictionary is 2,000 words pertaining to rain, different types of rain in the Japanese language. Many of them are anachronistic. They're words that have been lost in the mists of time. They go back to the Manyoshu, the collection of 10,000 leaves, which is it's a historical document, but it is just another way to look at lacuna and examine really the relationship of the Japanese society to nature. 2,000 very specific observations of types of rain. A moon that has been cleansed by rain, a brief shower. Kumoji. Kumoji is a path through clouds that is traversed by the moon and birds. We don't have that. We don't have that here in this language. And so this is an examination of how language can depict our values, how it can depict a relationship. Now, there are many reasons which I won't go into all. Shinto is the native religion of Japan that has deities. The students who went to Japan may have noticed shimenawa, rice rope around trees, a stone. That rice rope, shimenawa, means a deity has come to reside in that tree. It means I am sleeping, I am a deity, I reside in this stone or tree. There are 6 million deities, and it is animism. They are deities of rain, of the moon, of natural phenomena. That is one reason. Another reason, because Japan is only 10% arable land. It is mountainy rice farming. You really need to be attuned to nature. You have reverence for nature. You have fear. If it does not rain, children starve. And so in my rain dictionary, dozens of words in the topic of amagoi, praying for rain, rain prayers, lots of blessed rain, rain that has finally fallen after many praying, after 10,000 monks. Actually, I will say this one because this is one of my favorite words. So there is a word, there was a lot of praying for rain. I guess it kind of worked a little bit, But the best one was a lady. Her name is Ono no Komachi. A lady, 10,000 Buddhist monks. I mean, I was born in a Buddhist family, so this is not to, it's not like a diss, a diss to them or anything. But the 10,000 monks could not make it rain. And then a lady named Ono no Komachi, a poetess, went and said the most beautiful poem of rain in the world, and it rained. And so anyway, that's the rabbit hole no on here. I'd like to take some questions because I know I probably introduced some strange words and concepts and things, so I'd like to leave time for that. But my final thoughts for the clouds and Mono no Aware is that I would love to point out the perspective of the clouds. I make things that are contemplative. It's thinking about something. It's thinking about a space. It's thinking about everything that we've discussed thus far. And there is a sort of final word, and the word is called Heijōshin. Heijōshin. And that means calm under duress, tranquility under duress. And especially in these which I might deem as disparate times, I make things that I'd like to be in that space. I think the things we see can change our state of mind. I think it's also easy to remain calm when things are calm. I remind myself to find calm, heijōshin, in times of duress. That's a discipline. And so that is just my personal yearning, I may say, in these works. So thank you so much for having me. Thank you very much. I'm so happy to answer any questions if there are any. Yes.
One came to mind when you mentioned the 72 seasons, and I'm thinking about climate change.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if there's discussion about if that shifts.
Yes, in fact, the public art project called Flower Atlas that I recently created in New York, part of the idea for it was 72 seasons depicted in banners of, I reimagined 365 days as flowers and researched what flower is in bloom that very day. And it was based upon the 72 seasons calendar so this is going to be maybe a little more than you asked for, but the 72 seasons calendar, the Pentad's calendar, is derived from an even older calendar called the 24 seasons calendar, the solar terms. The 24 seasons calendar is a Chinese calendar. It was created 2,500 years ago in the Yellow River Basin. It's considered a heritage concept, an idea that has been protected. It is an agrarian calendar based on the solar ecliptic. So as Earth revolves around the sun at every 15 degrees, equaling 24 seasons, every 15 degrees, a phenological shift occurs. So the 24 seasons is based on direct observation of, for example, great rains occur for these 2 weeks. It's everything based upon something that occurs in nature. Those were they imported by Japan or exported to Japan? The solar terms calendar went to Japan. It was further subdivided by 3, creating the Pentad's calendar. That was even more specifically, it was more attuned to the Japanese terrain and the phenological shifts, as I discussed. Frogs start singing in the rice fields in Japan. And so the attraction that I have to these calendars is that they were crowdsourced and utilized. They were pragmatic calendars. They are poetic. They are absolutely poetic. They were used for a pragmatic agrarian purpose. You needed to know when frost descended. That is a season. You needed to know when to sow the seeds. You needed to know when hibernating creatures close their doors. It is going to elicit a change of something. And so you are deeply attuned to the movements of nature as an agrarian society, both in Japan and in China. Now, the wild geese return. They are not returning, in fact. We have found it is off by 8 to 12 days due to climate change. And so, yes, this is in terms of the zeitgeist, the cultural zeitgeist of today, it has become what I gave another talk during this project and addressed that it is a poetic way to engage climate change rather than perhaps a didactic way to look at the climate crisis. So, yes, thank you. That was maybe that shouldn't have been on my rabbit hole topics. I don't know, but yes, that was. Thank you for that. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about your technique for making your pieces?
Oh yes. So they begin as photographs. And as I stated earlier, I record the time and the place. They are, the process is, it's a printing and painting technique. There's some of them I print the clouds onto the metal. There are layering of pure micronized silver, which is called ginpu in Japan. It's a powder silver. I work with urethane, pigment, sometimes resin, and create up to 20 layers of painting on top of the very thin layers. It's painted with a brush to create the work. So it is, I'm not going to call myself a heretic or anything, but it's a little bit unconventional, I would say. Yes?
You have photographs that included some of the cubes.
Yes.
You were in Houston,
Yes.
which I saw pages ago. And those were very, very different than your cloud series. And I think it was charred wood that was part of that.
It was, yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about the process or inspiration behind the cubes that you did?
Sure. So the cubes are correctly charred wood. Now, charred wood, as I've said, I'm from somewhere called Okayama, and in that region, there is a material called shosugiban, or yakisugi. It's charred cedar. And charred cedar is used as architectural exterior cladding. So all of the houses in that region, and our temple, is clad in charred wood. So the wood is pre-charred to prevent fires. It's a really fantastic, in Japanese you say, kanshin shimasu. Kanshin is you have a sense of reverence and appreciation for the old way that something was very cleverly done. So when wood is charred, you don't have this conflagration. You don't have this burning of the building. In particular, Buddhist temple, you have incense, you have candles, you have rice tatami mat. You have fire is really a problem. Well, anywhere. So the pre-charred wood is very distinctive. It's very striking because it is black. So when I was a little girl, I would try to find things that were like things, similar things. It was like a little game because my family lived in two places. So in the Santa Cruz Mountains, I lived in a redwood forest. When these redwood trees are sometimes 200 feet tall, frequently struck by lightning because they're way, way up in the heavens up there. So my father had made my sister and I a treehouse in a charred wood, a redwood tree that was struck by lightning. And I said, oh, this is just like exactly like being in Japan. And so that was sort of looking at a material that the charred wood, there is something about it. It takes away the presence of the wood. It also preserves the presence. You still see the rings of the trees, but it changes it inherently into something that I found very attractive, and I was very interested in these objects that have been transformed by fire and yet become stronger. There's something quite poetic that felt quite poetic to me. It's also an homage to my family and where I'm from, and the juxtaposition of these really sort of solid blocks of charred wood with the clouds is something that I found to be to have both a tension and a harmony, so there. Although the materiality may seem disparate or unconnected, it's just a thinking process and an approach that connects those works, I would say. Yes?
I understand you grew up in Japan and the United States,
Mm-hmm.
and I see the influence of Japan in your work and the description of your work. What was the influence of living in the United States, and how did you split your time, or what formative years were spent there?
I went to Japan as an infant and went to the Santa Cruz Mountains when I was about 7 years old. And then I was sort of back and forth all the way up to, I spent time there after I graduated from high school. My education has been primarily in the United States. The very, very strong influence of living in my parents lived on 25 acres of redwood forest, just raw, wild, off the grid, really. There was a well and a generator at one point. It was very, very remote. And I guess that's where I became a tree hugger, is what you might say. So I am a lover of nature. I find, as I said earlier, that nature and this notion within Zen of using ordinary things, of things that are it's quite democratic. It's accessible to anyone. Everyone knows. And I found that nature was a connective thread to both, as my family moved back and forth from Japan, and it was something that provided solace to me, that there were clouds here, there were clouds there, and it really became another vocabulary. English is my second language, but English, Japanese, and nature, that's what I have. That's what I have to speak my piece. That combined with the inherent characteristics of the materials themselves. The charred wood blocks, they would not communicate if it was, for example, ceramic, for example, or another material. So those are the systems of language that I employ in this work that I do, that really is art is communication. Art is a dialogue. Mm-hmm. Yes? No? Yes? Yes. Oh. Yes, Dr. Nathan.
Nathan, now, or would you like
Yes, please.
back
Yes.
at the museum?
Back at the museum. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you.